Fire away, fire away. Shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. Mended light.
If only I knew more lyrics.
Welcome to Ask Us Anything. We put it to you, our Mended Light community, your struggles with depression, mood swings, feeling like a burden. You asked, we're going to answer. Let's do this.
How do I deal with the setbacks and ups and downs? It's hard to enjoy the good days because I'm so suspicious of the days to follow. The other shoe always drops, and it's usually a massive boot.
Oh, man.
I think that's so relatable.
It's so relatable.
Like, it's just the human experience. You're like, things are going so good, and I don't know if I want to celebrate it because, man, what happens when something completely out of control smacks me upside the head?
Yeah.
This looks suspicious.
And if my guard is up and I'm anticipating that it's going to suck, then maybe it'll suck less. But then I also am not really enjoying this moment.
Right.
The most powerful example of this in my life was my Aunt Robin, who you met. My Aunt Robin passed away from terminal cancer. And she knew she was going to die. She had plenty of time to prepare her funeral. Her funeral is one of my favorite funerals I've ever been to because it was clearly like choose your own adventure. She chose everything she wanted and exactly how she wanted it to be. But she had so many rough days with the chemo and with just the suffering of the cancer itself, where she felt like she couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't go out. She was in too much pain. Interacting with loved ones, it was hard for her to be present because there was so much struggle and so much torment, and she could handle a few minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget learning from her that she knew that for every, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think for every 4 or 5 terrible days, she would have one good day.
Yeah.
And she would have in advance, when the good day hits.
Yeah. Here's my plan.
Here's my plan, and here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because she knew she was dying.
Yeah. So she could celebrate the good days.
Yeah. Because she treasured them. And she knew that the bad days were coming almost immediately after. But so they would go out and, go on nature walks, or not on hikes per se, but stuff where they could, help her around. But
she would do the things that she enjoyed and lit up her world with the time that she had. With
the people she cared the most about.
Yeah.
And I always was so inspired by that because it would be very easy to just say, it's terrible, it sucks, I hate that I don't have as many good days as bad days. And to be honest, she did say stuff like that. Her son's giving the eulogy and he says, Mom wanted me to make sure to say that I don't say Mom never complained, and she was always
like, don't get up there and say I never complained. She's like, because I complained all the time, so don't whitewash this. Yeah.
I complained all the time.
Yeah.
But she still treasured those days and took advantage of them. That is radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is, I don't like my circumstances. I don't choose these circumstances.
Yeah.
But I accept that they are, and I'm going to make the best of them. Now, we may not be able to predict the good days and the bad days as cyclically as she was able to. As
someone going through chemo treatments.
Right, where they know what the schedule is going to be. But we can anticipate the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs of life.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, anticipating that there's always going to be trials. That whenever there's a peak, there's a valley not too far off. And instead of being bitter that it should be all peaks or I should plateau up here, just knowing that this is what life looks like, then first of all, instead of feeling blindsided when it happens or living in fear of it happening because it just ruined the good vibe, it's like, yeah, I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
There's going to be a stressor around the corner. There's going to be something hard.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful day today is.
Well, and I believe that there's a universal law that we can only know as much joy as we've known sorrow.
Yeah.
Right? And so sometimes when we're in the deeper sorrow, it's uncomfortable. We don't like it. We don't want to be there, right? Yeah. But the sorrow has things to teach us just as much as the joy has things to teach us.
Another in a long line of lessons.
And we can look to that hope of brighter days when we're in the sorrow. And we can look for what it's trying to teach us. And we can look for our growth opportunities.
This reminds me of a wonderful moment in Little Miss Sunshine where Steve Carell, he plays this uncle, and he's a Proust scholar. And his nephew, this teenager...
A Proust scholar?
Yeah.
What's a Proust scholar?
A scholar of Proust. So Proust was a novelist and is considered by many to be the second behind Shakespeare.
Oh, okay.
But
Thanks for educating me today.
But not nearly
and you, gentle viewer, if you also didn't know what a Proust scholar was.
But not nearly as popular in the United States. Proust spoke to the pain and suffering of a lot of people in Europe because Proust had a lot of pain and suffering in his life.
Oh, I see.
But there's this...
This was a total blind spot for me.
But
literary blind spot.
For me too, honestly. I learned about Proust through the movie, which is not surprising. Anyways, but he tells his nephew, because his nephew hates high school and just wishes he could be like cryogenically frozen and thawed out once high school is done. Just like skip it. Because he's bullied and he's miserable. And Steve Carell tells him.
He gets down to the end of his life. And he looks back and decides that all those years he suffered, those were the best years of his life. Because they made him who he was. All the years he was happy, total waste. Didn't learn a thing.
And then he tells his nephew.
So, if you sleep until you're 18, think of the suffering you're gonna miss. I mean, high school, those are your prime suffering years. They don't get better suffering than that.
Those are prime suffering years.
Those are prime suffering years.
those are crucial, but those are crucial years for making you a more compassionate, understanding, wise person.
Yeah. It makes me think of an equation.
Okay.
So I think this was in when we read the book, You Can Be Happy No Matter What.
Yeah.
I think. I could be wrong. That or it was in the book, The Choice. Either way, it's in one of the books that we discussed during our podcast in our membership site. And what it is suffering times resistance equals pain, right? And we cannot take the suffering out of our life. There is no way to control the suffering. There are things that are just going to happen. The variable that we have control over is the resistance, right?
Yeah.
And whether we take that resistance down to 0 or up to 1,000, right? That then equates to how much pain we experience. And I know in my life, as I've worked through the resistance that I felt to different pain, because I'm like, man, I don't want to suffer any more than I have to in this situation, right? I've had enough of you! And so it's like, well, how do I bring my resistance down, right?
How can I live in acceptance?
Right,
and even gratitude for this experience helps me to appreciate, the valleys help me to appreciate the peaks.
Yeah.
The suffering helps me to appreciate the joy.
And I love talking about gratitude and the way it can completely change an experience and even transmute, if you will, how we feel about an experience and how we see it. But gratitude has to come. There's steps before gratitude. We can't just jump to gratitude and be like, fake it till we make it. I'm just going to pretend I like this, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to work through the false beliefs. We have to work through the incongruent emotions. And I don't want to get too lost there. But if you can look for the bright spots in what you're experiencing, because when we're going through hard situations, sometimes we get really myopic. Sometimes we zone in really close on the things that we don't like, and then we're not seeing anything else. And then that creates the lens in which we view our world through, right?
Yeah.
Like it creates a gray, like an overall gray, when it's like, oh no, there are some purples, there are some reds, there are some dark spots, and there are some gray. But if what we're focusing on is the suffering, that's increasing our resistance and that's increasing our pain.
Whatever we focus on grows larger. Here's another great movie quote from Star Wars. Qui-Gon Jinn tells Anakin,
always remember, your focus determines your reality.
And then one last movie quote for good measure, and then to the next question. I recently saw Bob Marley, One Love, about Bob Marley. And he was trying to bring peace to people through his music. The message of his music was all about peace. And during a particularly turbulent time of his life, he says to his wife, because he's wrestling with imposter syndrome, and he says, how can I bring peace to the people? I can't even bring peace to myself.
Yeah.
And her response is, your struggles and your striving, that's the source of your power.
Next question. I feel like I'm a burden to my spouse for not being functional. What should I do?
I have an answer to this.
I feel that one deeply. I felt that way.
You did when you were pregnant with our
Yeah.
daughter.
Well, all of the children, but it was worse with the girls.
Here's what I would say if you feel like a burden to anybody, you feeling like a burden often increases the burden, because then you're constantly apologizing and then needing them to reassure you that you're not a burden, right? So then in addition to whatever extra things they're doing, they're having to reassure you. I think a great thing to replace I'm sorry with, especially when it comes to things that you're not choosing, like depression. Instead of I'm sorry I'm such a burden, I'm sorry you have to deal with this, replace I'm sorry with thank you.
Yeah.
I know I'm struggling, and it means so much to me that you're stepping up and helping carry the load. Thank you. Because that person loves you. That person wants to be there for you. And they also want to feel like it's making a difference for you. Yeah. Like I say this as somebody who's been there. That's what that person needs. Not I'm sorry I'm such a burden. I wish, any of that. So if you feel like you're a burden to your spouse.
Or anyone else.
Burden may be the wrong word, but you can acknowledge, yeah, they're having to pull some extra weight. And how are you going to deal with that? With gratitude. And with doing what you can to make them feel loved and appreciated, and to pull whatever weight you can pull.
Well, and I think that's such a powerful way to express gratitude in a genuine, supportive way, right? Because we were just talking about that, about not jumping to gratitude in a disingenuine way, but that's a way to do it in a very genuine way. And I found that very applicable in life because I am a very self-reliant person, and that's definitely a coping mechanism in my life. And I came by that coping mechanism very honestly, right? Yeah. So being willing to accept help is very hard. And times in my life, like I mentioned, when I'm pregnant with our kids, specifically certain kids, the pregnancy was worse and I needed even more help. Yeah. And that caused me to be aware of the worth tie that I had to accomplishment and how I found my worth and belonging in accomplishment. And so to switch that to thank you for your help. Thank you for being someone that I can rely on, and being grateful for that. And as often as possible, and I'm not someone who chronically apologizes, but every time I am tempted to apologize, I replace that with gratitude if I can, if it's appropriate.
And I was laughing earlier because I was thinking of a time with our daughter, you were pregnant and you were especially wrecked and could barely get out of bed. Yeah. And and I was happy to do everything I could to feed and clean up, and it wasn't how you would do it.
No.
But it was the best that I could do, and you just said thank you. Yeah. And it meant the world to me.
Last but not least, what to do if what worked in the past in combating depression may not work this time in combating depression?
Couple things. I mean, the most obvious answer is try new things, right? And listen to people who've been there. There are multiple podcasts on depression. There's books. Consult with a therapist. Consult with a counselor. Go to groups. Just educate yourself on how other people manage this. To that point, in the comments today, I'll just do this right now. How do you combat depression? How do you manage it? Because Mended Light is not meant to just be us. We're all a resource for each other, and that includes you. So in the comments below, sound off. Another thing that I would say is maybe change your standard for what combating depression looks like. You may think combating depression means that it's like it doesn't exist. I do X, Y, Z, and it's like it's gone, or it's very small, and I can live the life that I want to. Sometimes combating depression is I made it through another day. Sometimes combating depression is I'm going to get up and I'm going to shower today, and that's what I have in the tank. Sometimes combating depression is I accomplished all my tasks, and I took care of my kids, and I took care of my work, And I did everything that I committed to do, and I can hang my hat on that I honored my commitments, but I felt like garbage the entire time. And the fact is, none of it is wrong. It's all where you're at. So look at where you're at and honestly just take stock of, okay, what is the most supportive goal that I can set for myself right now? And how can I follow through with that? When we talked about finding support, people to help you carry the load and to say thank you, to that end, we've got another video. It takes a community to heal from trauma. We invite you to check that out as it pops up right here at the end. Until next time, folks, keep shining. We need your light.